Welcome to Commander Central, episode 254, and today we'll be taking a look at a listener, Al Roscoe's Drana, Kalastria Bloodchief Vampire Tribal deck. I'm Dana.
And I'm Chris.
Hey, Chris, how's it going?
Oh, it's going wonderful. I'm so happy to be here. Don't have to listen to Max talking.
We'll have to see if he listens to the show and catches the shade thrown in his direction.
He might. I don't know. Actually, I went over to his house this weekend, I think it was.
Oh, nice.
I think it was Saturday or something. Him and I just sat there and chatted and BS'd for a while. So it was nice to actually see people in person.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I miss doing that kind of stuff. Like, just going to his house and just being able to, like, sit and chill for an hour in BS, which is, we're getting close to being able to do that with other people. Like, Max is pretty safe because he's been pretty quarantined too. So we all have, it's easier for us, but like at some point it's getting much easier. So it's nice to be coming up the other end of all of this.
Yeah, I was completely dead yesterday. I felt like I got hit by a freight train because I got that damn COVID shot. This is my joke. Oh. I told everybody this joke too. They're like, "Oh, what's wrong with you?" I'm like, "Oh, Bill Gates put his microchip in my arm. He's talking to me and I'm losing my mind."
My first one didn't do much. My wife basically slept. Like, she got hers for her second one. She got it on like a Wednesday afternoon or whatever, and then literally slept all day Thursday. Like, she was up and down out of bed, but she was all day just in bed sleeping.
Yeah, I'm just like tired. Like, I had no energy yesterday, but today I feel wonderful. So
a little story. I wasn't sure I wanted to share this. I just heard it last night from my sister.
Oh boy. Did your mom buy another Harley?
No, it's not my mom. It's not mom affiliated, and I would guess she would get mad if I shared this, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's pretty crazy. So my nephew, he just turned 16, so he's old enough, and he has like his first girlfriend that he calls his girlfriend that he's dating, and he went to meet her parents.
Oh no!
For the first time.
I remember the first time I met my in-laws.
Never a good time. So they were going to go out to dinner, and so first of all, they got to whatever place they went, and his girlfriend's dad tried to buy him a drink, buy him an old fashioned because this is Wisconsin, and he didn't take the bait because that's definitely a trick.
Yep.
And he was smart enough to not take that bait. However, his girlfriend's father did have a drink or two or three or four, and then tried to get in the vehicle to drive home and made it about 2 blocks before he had to pull the car over and throw up on the side of the road. He was so drunk. And then the girlfriend's mother had to drive them the rest of the way home because he was clearly in no position to drive. So how's that for a first meeting of your girlfriend's father where he just gets hammered?
That would be awesome. Like if in the future, they stay together and they get married or whatnot. That's just like complete ammunition as, the father-in-law gets older and he's like, "Oh, you know what? Back in the day," be like, "I remember back in the day when you got drunk and couldn't drive us around."
Wow. I mean, and first, my sister, of course, was mad at first. Like, well, he's driving drunk with my kid in the car. But she's like, it's just such a crazy story. I don't even know how to react at this point. So I'm like, yeah, that's small town. There's a little bit of small town Wisconsin going on there. So, So anyway, I that was fresh in my mind, so I thought I would quick tell that story, even though she'd be totally angry at me if she knew I told it on the air.
Oh, no.
So if you out there in listener land have any insane first date meeting the folks stories you want to share, how would you go about telling us that, Chris?
You can find us on a multitude of social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can find us on Facebook by searching CMDR Central. You can find us on YouTube by searching CMDR Central. And you can also find us online at cmdrcentral.com.
You can also find us on patreon.com/CMDRCentral if you wish to support the show. However, just by listening or clicking a like or upvote on your podcast medium of choice, that helps us a lot too. We appreciate any support we can get. So thank you all. Thanks to our listeners. Thanks to our supporters. Thanks to everybody. We are also kind of knee deep in Strixhaven, preview season here. Have you been paying much attention so far, Chris?
I've had a lot of people like sending me pictures of stuff and talking about it, and everyone's all, calling blasphemy on the faithless looting art of the card and stuff. And I mean, I haven't really paid close attention to like the Strixhaven itself, but the extra cards that are coming out with them, I've been paying attention to them because a few of the arts do look pretty cool. I might try to find a couple of them, but other than that, not really close yet.
Yeah, I've been watching it, but kind of not as closely as I usually do as well, just because there's just so much stuff this year, and it's kind of been nice to be on a bit of a break, but I have been paying attention. It looks pretty cool so far. I will say the cards are very powerful, I would say, for standard, but I would say for commander, they found this weird balance where nothing seems like crazy busted in commander necessarily.
Well, they haven't. I don't think they've given us the commander decks yet, neither.
That's
so
true. Oh, yeah. I think we've had the face cards, and that's it. So there's a lot more to come there. Yeah. There's going to be a gazillion cards still over the course of the next few weeks. So we've got a busy month ahead of us, I would say.
It's going to be crazy. And then right after that, we got another set coming out. And then right after that, another set. And
it never ends, basically.
So listeners, do you want to hear set reviews? No is the answer. That is the answer. No.
I actually quite liked how we did it last time, where we just each picked a couple cards and talked about it, and the listeners seemed to like that as well, because at this point too, between all the Commander podcasts out there, everyone doing a set review, it's really tough to add anything unique or interesting, and I did find that breaking it down and just doing a couple cards each and talking longer about those was maybe a little more useful.
Yeah, I always had the issue whenever we did them was looking at it and be like, everyone's already talked about these cards, and I love these cards. What else can I say aside from thumbs up? This is a good one.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think we'll probably try to revisit that thing we did last time, where we just each pick a few cards and go into those in a little more detail.
Yep. As long as all our listeners out there like it the way that we do it, I'll keep doing it for them.
Same here. All right, so should we jump into this deck tech?
Yeah, let's hammer this bad boy out.
All right, why don't you tell us? Max sends a few questions out here, and we have a few answers back.
So as Dana said, Max sends out these questions, and the first question that we sent out is, what is your meta like? Al responded with, I play with a group of friends where there can be anywhere between 3 to 6 people in a game. We all play to win, but their friendly matches and weird, outlandish decks are encouraged. Well, that sounds like a blast.
Yes, indeed. We also ask, what is the goal of the deck? And it said the deck started out as pure mono-black vampire tribal. It has, as a result of having to respond to multiple board wipes, become a completely vampiric deck. Wins purely from draining opponents happen more often than through just creature damage, and he uses his and his opponent's life totals as resources to exploit.
So the next question is, what are the areas of weakness or areas we should focus on? So efficiency and trimming the fat, so to speak. In games of this size, recovering from board wipes is a challenge when they come at rapid fire. So I'm assuming you're probably playing with a bunch of white decks and other stuff like that.
Sure.
Just like board wipe after board wipe after board wipe type of deal. We also ask, budget restrictions for single card upgrades or for all upgrades. And he responded with, within reason, but open to suggestions. So, I'm assuming that means no ABR duels, like $100 cards, that kind of fun stuff. And then he also proceeded to just thank us for doing this. He loves the work that we do, and he thoroughly enjoys our podcast, which I have to say thank you very much for that. It's wonderful to hear back from people about that.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. So Drana, Kalastria Bloodchief, is a vampire shaman, 3 double black. She has flying, and she's a 4/4. But the kind of relevant bit of info here is for X and black, target creature gets -0, -X until end of turn, and Drana gets +X +0 till end of turn. So if you spend, the X is 4, she becomes an 8/4, and some other creature loses 4 toughness and probably dies. I will make a note here when I'm talking about this deck. I built a Drana Kalastria Bloodchief Vampire Tribal deck many, many years ago.
It was a pain to deal with, too.
Well, and the same thing happened here where it got a little bit tricky to reliably get through with vampire damage. So, because Drana works really well with having a bunch of mana, I also found myself leaning more into the drain life kind of thing. Not that you couldn't still kill people with by one-shotting with her or by just having vampire swing through, but it also gave me another way to win. So I had the same deck and did the very same thing. So I'm definitely looking forward to talking about this since I can speak to having been there.
Yep.
All right. First things first, this is mono black deck, so the land base is relatively easy to look at. I'll go over those here. Pajuka Bog to start with, a Cabal Coffers to make a bunch of mana. We have a Cavern of Souls, since it's almost all vampires. Your vampires then become uncounterable. There's a Field of Ruin as a way to deal with other people's troublesome lands. Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, another big mana maker. There are 13 snow-covered swamps, 16 regular swamps, and a Witch's Cottage. So 35 lands total, and that tends to be around where I sit in monocolor decks as well, so that looks about right.
Yep.
Any thoughts on the lands we're seeing here, Chris?
I actually have quite a few that I would suggest. Due to the simple fact that there's only, I think it was 2 utility lands in here. Well, 3 if you include Witch's Cottage. since this is a monocolored deck, you can definitely ramp up the utility land slots.
Sure.
Hard, because you don't have to worry too much about it. A couple of them I was suggesting, I saw the Fielded Room, but you could also always add, like a Ghost Quarter, Strip Miner, Wasteland on top of that. Having an extra source of that too is always nice. The other one that I came across, and a lot of people, it's been a controversy as of late with other people I've talked to, is actually playing an Urborg in a deck like this. The reason that I would choose to play one is if you up the land count of utility lands that are colorless, it gives you colored mana on those colorless sources. It also goes with a few of the other spells that you have within the deck that require you to have black mana or swamps, and hence of one of the Planeswalker ultimates that's on this list. So that just adds to that cause right there.
Yeah, I have a mono black veto deck right now that runs an Urborg, but I also ran Urborg back when I was playing Drana for the exact same reason.
Yep.
Now, when I had the Drana deck, that was like 2014 or 2015 or whatever, when Urborg had gotten a reprint. So it was like a $6 card. It was relatively easy to pick up and put in a deck. It's not that cheap now.
It just received a reprint in Time Spiral, and I think they're at
that's right.
17 or something like
that. There we go.
I bought a couple of them.
So it's a little bit better than it was when it was sitting at like 35 or something.
That was outrageous.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that does help. So I agree. Urborg, and it also lets you play with a few more of those utility lands and they don't hurt you. Although they don't hurt you that much in a mono black deck.
No. I was just thinking more along the lines of a couple of the spells in here that, require the black mana to be pumped into it. So why not have another outlet to it? A couple other ones that I had on here too is such as like Castle Lochthwain or War Room, depending on which one you can find, because I know War Room's really hard to find. But that extra card draw built into a land is always helpful, especially with the fact of, board wipe after board wipe after board wipe. Eventually you're going to blow your hand and you can't really refill it. So why not have a free, cheap source to do it?
I really like War Room a lot, and I would like it here, especially where it only hits you for one life when you use it.
Yep.
And yeah, that one's a good call. The one land I had down here that I liked was Deserted Temple, which is an old land from Odyssey, and it's not in the reserve list, but it has never had a reprint, so it's like $20-ish right now.
Ouch.
Yeah, so that's relatively expensive. But if you have one or have the means to get one, it's a land that you can tap for one in a colorless and untap another land. So like if you were at that point in the game where you're using Cabal Coffers to make 8 mana, it lets you, get another 4 or 5 mana out of your Cabal Coffers as well.
True.
And it doesn't come into play tapped. It still taps for colorless mana. If you have an Urborg out, that kind of fixes it a little as well. So that's one I've liked a lot here.
Yeah. I have a couple other ones in Shizo, Death Storehouse, and Rogue's Passage. Both of these allowing you to give, Shizo gives fear to a legendary creature. Mm-hmm. Rogue's Passage gives unblockable. Just another way to put through beats, because sometimes you're going to run in that issue where you can't. And if Drana's huge, and they have a blocker, why not just make it so they can't block type of deal?
Yeah.
And the last one is, since this is a monocolored deck, I like always suggesting this one, that's Terrain Generator. Just the ability to start throwing, lands out, especially in a deck that doesn't have ramp built in. So, I don't think it's a very expensive card anymore, because not a lot of people play it anymore, but it's always something to think about. And then, as you discussed, Urborg just gives you the black mana off it, so it works out that way.
I would say with lands, that the balance you want to find is like if you are running a bunch of things that double land. So like if you have, because there's a Cage Sun in here, and we'll talk about that when we get to artifacts, but it's just one Cage Sun. It's different if you're playing Cage Sun and extra planar lands, and you're playing the Gauntlet of Power, and you have the creatures that double your mana. Like then you want to probably stay around that 30, 28 to 30 basic land range. But if you're not going to be running all of those, then you have a lot more leeway to run utility lands in this kind of deck.
Yeah, and Gauntlet of Power did receive a reprint too, so it could be something to hunt down. I don't know the price on it because I don't ever play those kind of cards. So, but with a reprint guaranteed, it had to have dropped in price.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's jump over to the enchantments here. Chris, why don't we look at what enchantments are in the deck?
We have 4 enchantments. We have Bloodchief Ascension, No Mercy, and then he's been hanging out with Max too long, and he's playing the Blood Bond combo, which is Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Blood, for those that don't know.
So there's a win con right there with those 2 enchantments if you have to have them out. No Mercy is an old one from Urza's, I think it's Urza's Destiny. Whenever a creature successfully deals damage to you, destroy it. So it's a way to discourage people from attacking. And Bloodchief Ascension is just a really good card in general. It's on theme with Drana, of course, but at the beginning of each end step, if an opponent lost 2 or more life this turn, you put a quest counter on it, and whenever a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, if it has 3 or more quest counters on it, you may have that player lose 2 life and you gain 2 life.
Yep. If it's a vampiric theme straight up. I mean, just Bloodchief in general,
Yeah.
that's talking about, I think it talks about Soren, because I think he was a Bloodchief or something like that, or Edgar Markov, whoever it was.
And that also interacts nicely with the cards like Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood that are already in here as well. So gives you extra triggers there. Was there anything from enchantments that you liked or disliked or wanted to add?
Okay, there they are. I was actually looking at my notes right here. I have a few of them. I tried to stick hard to this like vampiric theme, like, life usage, draining life to do other stuff. So I came up with a couple of them, such as like Argos Bloodfast.
Oh, yeah.
There's Greed, Necropotence, however people pronounce it. Please, Twitter, don't attack me for pronouncing it wrong. And Phyrexian Arena. They all fit the theme of your vampire theme, where you're losing life to do stuff. The one I like the most on theme, which a lot of people don't play, is Argos Bloodfast. So, and the reason I love this is it fits that vampiric theme to like a T, where you're just dying, and all of a sudden it transforms, and now it's like, in order to sustain myself, I have to kill other things. Well, you sack off your other creatures and you gain life out of it. So that's what I like most about that one. And I want to see more people playing that card a lot. And I know it's super cheap, so whereas like Greed and the other ones are up there in price.
Yeah, they've definitely got up. That is one of the few that have stayed kind of affordable for people, for sure.
Yep. I had one other one that I was going to bring up, and I pushed this out there a lot for people. And seeing how you have an issue with board wipes, Phyrexian Reclamation. It's a 2-mana enchantment for, I think it's like 1 black you activate it, but you can return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And, being able to rebuild that way where you can keep recurring your creatures out of the graveyard, but it's not like a huge threat as what Return of the Dark Realms and stuff like that is.
Yeah, that's a really efficient way to get that stuff back, for sure. The only really suggestions I had here, they're kind of 2 versions of the same card, one of which is expensive, one which isn't. The first is Cover of Darkness. It's an enchantment where you pick a creature type, and it costs 1 and a black. So you pick vampires here, and it gives them fear, so they can only be blocked by black creatures and artifact creatures.
Ooh, nice.
So you have some vampires with no flying. This will help them poke through because none of them have trample either. But even your flyers, are going to get past a lot of other flyers then if they suddenly have fear. So that would be really useful for helping even like Drana poke through and get damage onto people. The problem here is like sort of Temple, even though it's not on the reserve list, it hasn't had a printing ever. There's been no reprint. So it's sitting at like $30-ish.
Ouch.
However, there's a similar card called Intimidation that does, and I say similar, it's similar and it does exact same thing. It just does it for all creatures, so you don't have to name vampires. But it costs 2 black, so it's 5 mana instead of 2 mana to cast.
Yep.
Same exact function though. So, and you can buy it for $0.25. So if you want that ability to give your creatures some way to easier poke through on people and don't spend $30, Intimidation will help a lot getting through as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing I noticed with this deck. We haven't really, because we haven't hit the creature suite yet or anything, but the CMC seems high in this deck. Mm-hmm. So the meta kind of seems like more of a relaxed, slow meta, like he was talking about, more casual, wacky, janky stuff that you play. So those higher CMC cards won't be such an issue too much.
Yeah, Intimidation, definitely. And I would say the card I don't love of the 4 enchantments is No Mercy. And I say
Agreed.
that I like it. It's a cool card. I never really found it stopped anybody. Like maybe people won't hit you with some chip damage here or there because they don't want to lose their creature. But like if they're going to kill you, they're just going to kill you. And they'll just deal with the effects of it afterwards.
Well, I've seen that with No Mercy out, if they have like an 8/8 or something sitting there, they're like, well, I'll sacrifice this 8/8 to smack you for 8.
Right.
It doesn't bother me any, because I'm already in that type of deck that, I'll just recast something bigger again and do other stuff.
Yeah, it does reduce some damage, but I think it's not as effective as people really think it's going to be once they start playing it. So that might be the one I would pull to find room for something, but I don't dislike it. It's a cool card.
It is definitely one that people think about, and you never know. It depends on the meta that he's playing. He could be playing against, like Voltron deck.
Sure, right.
Voltron deck floating around, and the Voltron player is going to look at that No Mercy and be like, yeah, we're not coming at you.
But even then, like, okay, so if they kill 2 other people, it's not going to stop them from killing you third because they don't care if their creature dies if it takes you out too. All right, let's jump over here and look at the sorceries. There's 11 different sorceries in this deck. We have Beacon of Unrest, which is a way to get an artifact or a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield. There's Blood Tribute, really a card you only see in vampire decks, 4 black, and it has Kicker to tap an untapped vampire you control. And since they're almost all vampires, that's pretty easy.
Yep.
And an opponent loses half his or her life rounded up, and if you kick it, you gain that amount of life. So in this kind of deck, that's just an absolute beating. There's Blood in the Snow from Kaldheim, which is 6 mana, and you can choose one, destroy all creatures, or destroy all planeswalkers, and then bring something back from the graveyard to play. There is Consume Spirit, which is just a way to gain life. It's X 1 black, and you can only spend black mana on it. And it deals X damage to a creature or player, and you gain that much life. So you can either use it to take out a creature or just hit somebody in the face directly and then gain a bunch back. There's Corrupt. It deals damage equal to the number of swamps you control to target creature or player, and you gain life equal to the damage dealt this way. This and Consume Spirit are both reasons to run the Urborg if you have access to one in lands that Chris talked about before. Demonic Tutor, Diabolic Tutor, just ways to go get up a win condition. Exsanguinate, just a way to spend a bunch of mana to kill people outside of just using Drana. Inguruk's Wake is a board wipe that is going to leave your stuff up. There is Killing Wave, which is 1 black and X, and for each creature its controller sacrifices it unless he or she pays X life. And there's Living Death, which is a way to swap out your graveyard with stuff in play.
Holy crap, did Living Death spike?
Yeah, it did. That's nuts. Yeah, I just noticed that as well looking at the price here. Last I remember, I was like, oh, it's a $10 card. No, it is not.
Whoa, I have like 2 foil versions of this. This is very shocking. This is a side tangent. I'm gonna bring this up. I hate to do this while we're in the middle of this, but we were actually looking at card prices last night, and something's going on with Magic where card prices are fluctuating so weirdly that you have to start checking history. You can't just use like TCG median anymore. It's becoming really weird. Yeah,
it's changing. Yeah, it's just too much to keep track of these days, for sure.
Yeah.
So, sorceries, any thoughts here, Chris?
I like the sorceries. I do like the higher costing spells, because like I said, I think that's the meta that they're just playing in. I'm in love with Blood on the Snow. Honestly, if I played this card, I might cut all my basic swamps to run all snow covered, so I have more, versatility guaranteed. I'm going to have, like 6 or 7 of them out when I cast it type of deal.
Mm-hmm.
So you get more of the oomph behind it. It also allows you to play other cards like Dead of Winter if you wanted to, or something like that with the snow type of thing.
Sure.
I understand Inguruk's Wake, but 9 mana is a lot of mana, and I almost would rather run a Damnation or something in its place, even though, yes, it's killing my stuff, and I understand it's an issue, rebuilding, but the mana efficiency is just there for something like that.
I tend to agree, and I also feel like if I want to spend that much mana on a board wipe, I'd rather do it on like a Decree of Pain and just draw 11 cards or something.
Yes, agreed. The other one is Killing Wave. I actually have played Killing Wave. It's been in and out of my Mogus deck quite a few times. I always found this card kind of lackluster, because it's hard to balance the amount of mana to put into it to force them to destroy their own creatures, or for them to sacrifice the life, because you kind of want them to sack the life more than kill the creatures. So it's a hard balancing act. I'd rather just have a straight up removals, like a mass removal spell, or run, instead of with Consume Spirit, you could run like a Drain Life along with that, so you have 2 of those outlets.
I was going to suggest Drain Life as well. I ran that alongside Consume Spirit when I was playing Drana, and it always felt pretty decent when I was making a ton of mana, so I'm on board with that one. I also don't like Killing Wave for the same reason. You can spend way too much mana to cast it to hit everything. First of all, you're like, I better spend 6 to make sure no one keeps too much stuff.
Yep.
So then it becomes an expensive board wipe, and then someone still says, okay, I'll lose everything but this Sun Titan. Which will then bring 2 things back, start bringing stuff back too. Like, people will pay the life to keep the 1 or 2 crazy things and let everything else go, and I'm not sure how often that accomplishes what you want to accomplish either.
Yep. I actually have a list of cards too as well that I would think about adding. One of them is Agadeem's Awakening. Granted, I know this card's been going up in price recently again too, but it serves all the purposes you're looking for. It's a reanimate effect. It's also a land in a pinch if you absolutely need it. I've been actually more and more on these MDFC cards hard. I've been loving every single one I've been seeing, just because of the fact of, you get to play lands, and Strixhaven's ruining my awesomeness of this MDFC cards right now. But the other one is Feed the Swarm. This is a brand new card, and I noticed there's not a whole lot of Commander Legends or other new cards in this deck. So this would be one, especially in a mono black deck, that should just go in. I mean, I wouldn't even hesitate. It's not an expensive card. It should be really easy to find, so just jam it in there. Another one, and this is just wacky off the wall one that I was thinking about, Temporal Extortion. Now this is, I think it's 4 black mana or 5 black mana, one of the 2. But pretty much what this is I take an extra turn, or one of my opponents get rid of half of their life. So this is the whole point of your vampire theme, is you want to drain people, so why not force this drain here, force them to voluntarily give you their life force. So, I mean, I'd love something like this, especially in a mono black deck, so why not just jam it in there?
Yeah, it's kind of a win-win in that situation, or you take an extra turn, and that feels pretty good as well.
Yep. And then, of course, I'm assuming you'll bring this up too, but there are no sorcery speed draw spells in here. Not one. And I found that a little weird due to the simple fact that I might play too much draw spells, and I'm assuming you're probably on the same point, where it's like, is this too much? Is this not enough draw in a deck type of deal? And the draw in black is still a thing where you're using life totals, you're using your own in this instance, but still fits your theme of, vampiricness and stuff.
Yes, I had Feed the Swarm down for sure, and if I had to swap something for it, it would probably be an instant speed spell, Pyrika's Libation, that we'll talk about when we get over there.
Okay.
That does a kind of a similar thing, but I think Feed the Swarm is way more consistent.
Yep.
So yeah, that's definitely one I agree. Like I said, I had Drain Life down. That was really, really solid. One I had for a board wipe that I would probably replace Killing Wave with is Crippling Fear, which is 2 black, and you choose a creature type, and creatures that aren't of the chosen type get -3/-3 till end of turn. It's not going to kill everything, but it's going to kill most things, or at least a lot of things, and it won't touch your stuff either.
Well, it's also a good, like a pre-combat trick type of deal. It's like, I'm going to make everything weaker, and I'm just going to send my board at you, because if you block, I'm just going to wipe everything you have.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think that's, for the 4 mana, it's really efficient, and it doesn't, suck up your whole turn either. So
yes,
that would be good here. I've got one that's unfortunately super pricey nowadays. Again, same as the Cover of Darkness and the Deserted Temple. Patriarch's Bidding is not on the reserve list, but it's never had a reprint. And it's a sorcery that lets you bring back all creatures of a type from the graveyard to play.
Yep.
So just name vampires and bring back 8 vampires straight onto the battlefield. It's one that will be fantastic in this deck. And I'm guessing it would be in here if Al had one. But if I would suggest one card to save up your lunch money for to get, that would make this deck much better, I would definitely get a Patriarch's Bidding. It's never not useful, and especially in a place where people are board wiping a lot, will be really, really good in this deck.
The weird thing about that card too is I don't ever see that in people's trade binders neither.
Yeah.
And that's weird because
it's also 20 years old, so that probably doesn't help either. And Chris mentioned draw. That's definitely one of the things I noticed here among the sorceries as well. One I would suggest for sure is Damnable Pact, which is an X draw spell. So you draw X cards, lose X life. And it's useful just to draw 3 or 4 cards. That's great, particularly when you have life gain. But in a deck like this that can sometimes make a ton of mana, you just make someone draw 15 cards and die.
Yep.
It's good as a fireball. When I played my Drana deck, I definitely drew 4 or 5 cards that here or there, but I would say almost more often than not, I was using it as a kill spell. Hey, draw 12 and you're at 11 life, so you just die.
Yeah, that's all totally a political card too. You're just like, I'm going to cast this for 20 and be like, but you get to draw 20 cards, man. Right. It's all good, right?
But I'm only at 18. Yeah. So that's one I would like there. There's a couple of other sorcery speed draw spells that are very similar. Not similar to that, similar to each other. There's Pact of the Serpent, which is 1 black, and you choose a creature type, and target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the number of creatures they control of the chosen type. So obviously that one you wouldn't want to target somebody else with, although you could if somebody else was playing a goblin deck. You could still dome them with that too, but you're probably just going to draw 6 or 7 off of your own vampires. And Minions Murmurs is similar. That one you can't target somebody else, but same thing. You can, probably draw a ton of cards, and since you have a lot of life gain here, it won't hurt you that bad.
I've seen people play Minions Murmurs in a Edgar Markov deck in that, and they play it, and I start counting, and I'm like, are you sure you want to cast that card?
When I had an Edgar deck for a while, because I had so many 1-drop vampires, it would be so good on turn 4, because you'd play vampire turn 1, make a token, play 1 or 2 vampires in turn 2 or turn 3, make a few more tokens. Turn 4, cast Minions Murmurs for 4 mana and draw 11 cards or something. And you go to 29, but it's turn 4. You don't care at that point, and then you're so far ahead and have so much advantage.
Yeah, it's impossible to come back from that.
Yeah, such a good card. Okay, Chris, why don't we take a look next at the instance? What do we have here?
There are 10 instants in here. We have Betrayal of Flesh, Feed the Serpent, Go for the Throat, Grip of Desolation, Pharika's Libation, however we want to pronounce that one, as Dana was discussing earlier, Poison the Cup, Rend Flesh, Suffer the Past, Urge to Feed, and Vraska's Contempt. Now, a lot of these I noticed are single target destroy cards, which is okay, I guess, because I don't know the meta that's really being played in.
Right.
But it's hard for me to go so many single target removal spells.
Particularly when they're not super efficient. So like
Yes.
Betrayal of Flesh is 6 mana, and it's an instant, which is good. You choose one, destroy target creature, or return target creature from your graveyard to play, or you can entwine it by sacrificing 3 lands, but I would bet you're not entwining it that often unless it's like turn 15 or something.
Yep.
So that means it's either 6 mana to bring a creature back, and there's not a ton of creatures in here that are maybe worth bringing back for 6 mana, and destroying a creature for 6 mana is not good either.
No. I do like a couple of them are exile effects, which is nice.
Yeah.
Like Farika's Contempt or Vraska's Contempt, Pardon, Grip of Desolation, Feed the Serpent, they're exile effects, so that's not
That's
bad.
helpful.
And a couple of them are, destroying planeswalkers too, so I mean, they're versatile in that, but
Yep.
I think too many of single target removal spells actually hurts when I'd rather have things that are going to boost what my deck wants to do.
Yeah, I agree. Particularly when they are relatively expensive, like in the case of Grip of Desolation or Betrayal of Flesh.
Yes.
One thing I would swap here, I would be very tempted to swap just one of those for Hero's Downfall. It's like
that
$3
fits the
now.
theme, too.
But yeah,
Vampires
and it hits
kill the heroes.
exactly.
Yes.
And it hits Planeswalker, so you have a little bit of extra versatility
Yep.
there. And one I like a lot in mono black decks that I think people should run more is Defile from Modern Horizons.
Yes, I have that along with Tendrils of Corruption, which are pretty much the same card, just different CMCs.
Exactly. Defile at 1 black mana, target creature it's -1/-1 for each swamp you control. That's just going to kill, like, occasionally someone will have some giant creature out that you can't kill, but most of the time it is so efficient that, and it will definitely solve your problem a lot as well.
Yep.
I think that was one I would try to find room for here.
Yeah, and that fits in with if you do play an Urborg in the deck, because
Yeah,
you need
exactly.
the swamps, and that
Yep.
turns all your lands into swamps. So the only other one that I had, aside from what you were talking about, I have obviously Vampiric Tutor just for the namesake, even
Sure.
though it's an expensive card,
Yeah.
I had to throw that one on there. The other one I had was Tainted Strike. It's another win-con card at instant speed, gives your creature +1/+0 and infect. And the way I looked at it is a lot of people hate infect, but I feel like it fits the vampire theme because,
Sure.
the vampire blood is evil, so it's tainted and all that stuff. So, let's just spread it around, like I'm going to taint you now with infect, and stuff like that.
You can also, like, the beauty of that card is you can use it on someone else's creature. Like someone else
Yes.
swings at like someone's got a giant 11/11 out and they swing at somebody and everyone's like, oh, that's going to hurt. And then Tainted Strike, suddenly they just die from it when they're at 50 life or something. And it's
I've
relative.
had that happen.
Yeah, I have too. Yeah, that's one I would consider here as well. It's an easy way to take somebody out in a lot of situations.
Yep, I tried to stick as close to theme as with like vampiric stuff because there are a lot of very good black instants,
Yes.
so I didn't want to pull too far away from that aspect that he wanted.
Chris mentioned Rise of the Dark Realms before as a way to bring all creatures back into play. It's a great card. It's a sorcery, but it's a great card. It's also expensive
9
as well.
mana or something like
Exactly.
that.
And expensive to buy and expensive to cast.
Oh, is it expensive to buy too?
Yeah, it's magic, man. Everything's expensive these days. The one I would suggest that does most of what it does that you could run here as a way to save your board is Thrilling Encore that was in Battle Bond, which is 4 and a black, and you just return all creatures from your graveyard to play that were put there from the battlefield this turn. And it's not just your graveyard, I should say. It's from any graveyard to play. So like when someone board wipes, if you have that sitting in your hand and mana free, just wait till the end of the turn and cast it and bring all your stuff back and all of their stuff.
Boom.
So a little more situational. You have to plan around it, but like it's one of those things where when you draw it and have it in hand and look around at the board, you're like, oh, I'm just going to play a little cautious because someone's going to board wipe on the next turn or two, and I'm going to take everything.
Oh, that feels so good.
Yeah.
And then they just board wipe the next turn again.
Right.
They just keep coming and you're like, but I got them all at one time.
Well, but because it's an instant too, like if it happens to be the person who's board wiping right before your turn, then the stuff can all attack that turn.
Ooh.
Like Rise of the Dark Realms is a sorcery, so you have to cast it on your turn and like then hope nobody board wipes when it comes back around.
Yep.
If you're waiting to the end of somebody's turn, even if it's not the player directly before you, well, they're already past their board wipe phase, and that just means like maybe the next person doesn't have one either. It's a lot easier to get those creatures to be able to swing with Throwing Encore than it is Rise of the Dark Realms. So that might be a helpful way to dodge some of those problematic board wipes also.
I should play that card in my Alessia deck. I'm gonna look into this card now.
There we go. I actually just put it into a deck as well, so
okay.
I've got to cast it lately and been really happy with it.
Awesome.
All right, let's jump over and take a look at artifacts here. There are 7 artifacts in this deck. There's a Caged Sun, which is a mana doubler and gives creatures +1/+1. Jet Medallion makes black spells cheaper to cast. And speaking of cards that have gone up crazy in price.
All of them have.
Yeah, the medallions have all popped. Lightning Greaves to keep Drana safe and give some haste. Skull Clamp to draw some cards off Vampires Dying. Soul Ring as the best mana rock. Vanquisher's Banner is a draw source, and it also buffs vampires. And Whip of Erebos is a way to get some recursion and, of course, gain a life.
Yep.
Thoughts on your artifacts here, Chris?
I like the artifact suite that he's got here. Skull Clamp's really good, especially in the board wipe scene. You can't cheat it like you do in some other decks. Caged Sun doubling your mana is really nice too. If you're going to use Caged Sun, honestly, well, I am looking at the CMC and it is really high. So Caged Sun just works in general. But usually I'd want to play more of, like, we're talking about, like the Drain Life and other stuff like that. So you have more outlets for that extra mana. And then Whip of Erebos, lifelink, reanimating, that fits all the keys that he's looking for with that. So I like everything. I had a few suggestions overall. A couple of them were such as Mind Stone, Thought Vessel, or any of the other colorless mana rocks that have something else stapled to them. Because you're in a monocolored deck, you can get away with running the other, more greedy mana rocks that give you other stuff as well. Expedition Map, I cannot stress this card enough in this deck. Allowing you to go for your Cabal Coffers, allowing you to go for your Nykthos or whatever else you need is just, indispensable. You might as well, this should just be jammed in this deck the moment you can get one.
I would be very tempted to run that as well for all those same reasons you just said.
Yep. And the last one I came down to was just equipment of general. I don't really have any of them like naming for sure, but anything to cover your lacking, like what your defense is lacking. So one that's popping in my head right now is like Sword of Sinew and Steel, which destroys artifacts and planeswalkers. Mm-hmm. So, you can't destroy artifacts in black, so why not have something that covers that base that you can't do?
Sure, yeah, that's a good call. So Chris mentioned mana rocks. There's just not a lot of rocks in this deck. There's not a ton of ramp in this deck. And if Al's playing in a meta where no one's running much of those kind of things, then maybe you don't want to change that up too much because you don't want to be like running away from your friends when they're all playing much slower decks too. So I totally get that. However, a couple mana rocks would be safe, and one I think might be pretty decent in this deck is Heraldic Banner. Again, number one, it's a 3 mana rock, so it's a little bit slower too, so you're not going to feel like you're necessarily racing kind of ahead of everybody. And you choose a color when it comes into play, creatures you control the chosen color get +1/+0. So there's a ton of creatures in this deck, which we'll talk about when we get to that point. But it's just one more way to give you an attack bonus when you're swinging in with like 4 or 5 bodies here, which this deck probably does pretty often. Makes it that much easier to take somebody out, and it's just never dead. It's like worst case, it's a mana rock there for you to tap to get more things done in a single turn. So
I forgot about that card.
Yeah, it's a neat. I've really liked it in every deck I've ran it in. It's in like my Talran deck. I run it there because might as well make those Drakes 3/2s.
Exactly. That's perfect. I was actually, once you brought it up, I'm like, I see the picture in my mind and everything, and I'm surprised I don't see that in more decks. But then again, you don't see a whole lot of monocolored decks anymore. You're seeing more 2 or 3 color decks.
Well, I think it's also one of those things, like, I've thought that same thought multiple times this year about cards. Like, man, I can't believe I've not seen that in play. Because we're playing Loyalist Commander as well the last year.
That's
so,
a good
that's
point
probably
there,
part
too.
of it because of COVID. We're just, like, seeing less decks, I think, in general. Like, because I play every Wednesday on our Twitch TV stream, but like 2 of the people never change. Matt and Joey are always there. It's always like a third guest. So the amount of decks I see, not only am I playing less games, when I play, I'm seeing 2 of the same people in every single pod who only have, like 5 or 6 decks each too. So I think that's probably part of that as well. Any of the stuff that's came out in the last, year to 18 months, I think we've just seen less because we've just seen less cards in general.
Yeah, well, stop talking about those cards because it's going to turn into Mystic Fish again.
There we go, right.
Up to like a $40 card or something.
Turn into a $10 card now. Yep. Okay, Chris, what do we have for Planeswalkers here?
There are 3 Planeswalkers. We have Liliana of the Dark Realms. This is the Liliana that tutors swamps, and then the alt gives you quad black for every swamp that you tap. You have Sorin Markov. This is the, hey, guess what? Your life total just becomes nothing now when I come into play. And then Sorin Imperious Bloodlord, which is the newest Sorin, I do believe.
I think so, yeah.
This is the one that's mainly on targeting vampires for sure. Gives them counters, does other stuff vampire related.
These all make sense for various reasons. Like if I was playing this, when I played my version of the Drana deck, I was not running the newest Sorin because obviously it wasn't a card when I had this deck, but I was running the other two. I had Sorin Markov just because he was very vamp-like and he gained life and he was useful. And I had Liliana because it was nice to be able to go get a swamp or use her to kill creatures. And that emblem is insane.
It is. I've only seen it kick maybe once or twice because most people, as soon as you get close to it, they're like, that needs to die now.
Yeah, people do not want that going off. But if you manage to get it off, it's busted.
So I had one for sure that I was going to suggest, and that's Liliana Dreadhorde General. I think she's the newest Liliana that's come out. For 6 mana, her abilities don't really matter too much, in my opinion, for what you're doing. They're just going to be like icing on the cake. It's her static ability that says whenever one of your creatures dies, you get to draw a card. So this will help out with the removal and the board wipes and stuff so you can refill your hand to allow you to replay into the board for the next turns.
Yeah, that feels a lot better when someone board wipes and you just draw a new grip.
Yeah, and it's not like an overly expensive card neither to buy, nor is it, the power level of it, because it's a 6 mana planeswalker, it's not going to like overwhelm your friends that you're playing with type of deal.
Yep. Yeah, and it's also one, talking about things like Patriarch's Bidding being tough to find. This is one you can find in your LGS or something. It's just going to be a card that's around because it's new enough.
Yeah, I think the only people that are looking for this one are the ones who are looking for like the altered art Japanese ones and stuff like that. So the regular ones should be pretty easy to find.
All right, the long part of the list we're at here right now, creatures, because there's 29 in this deck. And I'll just read them off quick, and then we can go back and talk about any ones that catch our eye that we want to mention.
Yep.
Anawan the Ruin Sage, Ascendant Evinkar, Ayara, First of Lochthwain, which is not a vampire, Bloodghast, Bloodline Keeper, Blood Tracker, Butcher of Malakir, Captivating Vampire, Champion of Dusk, Dark Imposter, the other 2 Dranas, Liberator of Malakir and the Last Bloodchief, Gatekeeper of Malakir, Kirik, Son of Yawgmoth, also not a vampire, Kalastria Highborn, Kalidas, Bloodchief of Get, Malakir Bloodwitch, Necropolis Regent, Nighthawk Scavenger, Nirkana Revenant, Patron of the Vein, Sanctum Seeker, Sangromancer, Skeletal Vampire, The Haunt of Hightower, Twilight Prophet, Vampire Hexmage, Vampire Nighthawk, and Vampire Nocturnus. All right.
Woohoo! Way to go!
I got through it. A lot of bloods in those names. I like Anawan a lot in any vampire deck. 4/3 is a decent body, but at the beginning of your upkeep, each player sacrifices a non-vampire creature. There's a couple here where you're going to get burned, but for the most part, it's never going to touch you, and everyone else is going to have to lose a creature. So that's some pretty decent value if you happen to get Anawan out.
Yeah, the nice thing about Anawan too in this deck is even though he's only playing, I think we counted 3, maybe 4 of them that are non-vampires. You just play into that, you don't have to play Anawan or play the non-vampire, so you don't have to sack it later.
Yeah, for sure. Bloodghast is always a really useful card, and it can't block, but hey, there's nothing better to Skull Clamp than a Bloodghast than just play that land and it comes right back. So then do it again.
Disgusting.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good ones here. These are a lot of the names I had in my vampire deck when I was playing it. I did not have Twilight Prophet because it wasn't out, but that card is crazy good. So I'm glad to see it here. And every time I click on it, it costs $5 more than the last time I clicked on it, and that's definitely true this time. It's already...
I think it deserves the price tag because of how good of a card it is.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I totally understand why it's the cost that it is. So
yep.
I always like seeing Vampire Hexmage in decks too. It's really efficient, 2 mana for a 2/1 for strike too. It's kind of a pain in the butt to block early in the game and just kills a Planeswalker.
It totally just nukes it out. Or you remove all the counters from if someone's playing +1/+1 counters deck or something, and they have them all jacked up on one guy.
Yeah. If worst case, it's a first strike 2/1 for 2 mana. That never feels bad on its own, and it can be so much better than that. So I always like seeing that in decks.
Yes. So this list I like the list a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's high CMC, which I find hard, but I did a dig, like a deep dig on vampires. A lot of them are high CMC, so
yes.
It was hard to really tweak that too much. I do have a few suggestions, and I don't think it's anything crazy. The creatures that I came up with, and one of them I'm surprised isn't in the deck because you are playing the other version of him, is Kalidas, Trader of Get. He's 4 mana, 3/4 with, I think he has lifelink. And whenever a creature your opponent controls dies, you exile it and you create a 2/2 zombie. So the value for that is just huge, especially with how you're already playing so much removal, and there's so much removal built into the games, apparently, from what I'm understanding. This could just, outvalue everything. The other two I have, I'm going to lump these two together, is Defiant Bloodlord and Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose, which are just more pieces of the Bloodbound combo. Might as well have them in there if you can make room for them. So if you're ever are reliant on that combo, you have more of the pieces, so you don't have to worry about if you lose one, you can just replace it with two of the other pieces.
Yep, Veto was one of the main ones I was going to suggest as well, for all the reasons you mentioned. Just a really good match for this particular deck.
Yeah, and the last one I have is Falcon Wrath Noble. And this one I was very surprised I didn't see in here overall, because this just fits the theme of, well, they're board wiping, so why not jam a creature that says whenever a creature you control dies, you can just start nuking people, for 1 damage and you gain 1 life. So, it's like, oh, I'm going to cast the Supreme Verdict. You're like, cool, you wipe everything. Now you're going to take 7 damage from all my creatures.
I had that marked down, as well as Blood Artist. Same thing. It's also a vampire and does something very similar. So I had the two of them were two of the creatures I would maybe find room for here as well.
Yeah. I mean, otherwise, I like the overall thing. I mean, there's a lot of really, really good vampires, but in my opinion, if we start jamming too many of the other really good ones in, it's going to pull away from... You're going to have to push more into the creature suite of, like your Heraldic Banner and other stuff like that to make the better deck overall.
And I would say, if you are going to find room for a couple things, it's easy to pull a Swamp for a War Room or something. But, if you do need to find room for a couple of these cards, this is probably where you're going to have to make cuts.
Yes.
Because, 29 creatures is not crazy, but it's also... It's still a lot of creatures, and I think if you turn a couple of those creatures into draw spells, not only will you not notice it, the deck will function even better, because you'll just draw down further and faster and have more creatures in hand to play, even though you technically have less in your deck.
Yeah, and the other upside to that is with the less amount of creatures in the deck, then you're not playing overly hard into the board, so when you get board wiped, it's hard for you to rebuild.
Yeah. So when it came time to make cuts, that's where I would make them. Hey, Skeletal Vampire is a cool card. It makes a couple tokens, for 3/3. But for 6 mana, is it that amazing necessarily when you could, run that Minions Murmurs or something and draw 6 cards, 3 of which would be creatures that are maybe more efficient that you can play anyway, and makes it that much easier to rebuild once something bad happens.
Yep.
So that would be my suggestion is maybe find space in the creature suite a little bit there. A lot of these are great, but whichever ones have performed the worst for you, that's probably where I would make a few of these cuts.
Yeah, because so my guess is off of this creature suite at 29 creatures, maybe looked at lists of other vampire decks, because I know the Edgar Markov deck runs 35 creatures or something in it, just because of the ability. You want to jam a creature to get another thing, whereas this deck isn't really too much reliant on it. I mean, because Drana she can be by herself and do her own thing, so you want to back her up more with your other creature base.
Yeah, the last note I would make, and I kind of talked about this a little bit before, if you wanted to really delve into the Drain Life thing while keeping the vampire theme, you definitely can. That's the point where you definitely want the things like the Deserted Temple, and you want the Extraplanar Lens, and you want the Gauntlet, and things like Bubbling Muck that double the amount of mana your swamps make to end a turn, and Doubling Cube to turn that 11 black mana into, you have to spend mana to use it, but okay, so you turn 11 into 18 or something.
Yep.
That gets really good then once you get to that point. So you could really super go hard on creating a ton of black mana to better use that Consume Spirit or the Damnable Pacts or the Exsanguinates or whatever. But that also looks at you're going to have to change a good chunk of the deck. So I didn't want to go too far down that road either, because that's
agreed.
Then you're looking at adding 20 different cards probably to make that happen.
Yeah, I do like the nice little split where you have 2 ways of doing stuff, and it fits the theme of being a vampire. So
yeah, you can still play vampires with a plan to hit people in the face, and oh hey, I happen to have Cabal Coffers out and I top decked Consume Spirit, so I can kill somebody with that. I totally get why you do it that way as well. So all right, Al, thank you very much for sharing this deck with us. We appreciate it. And thanks for supporting this show. The reason we've been able to do this for 250 episodes is we've had an amazing group of people that have supported us financially via Patreon and just by getting our name out there. So Al, thank you, and thanks to everybody. We really appreciate it.
Yes, indeed we do.
that is going to wrap up episode 254 for Commander Central. We'll be back next Monday with a new show. I'm Dana. You can find me on Twitter at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDR_Max, and you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. Our show is edited by Rafael Garcia. You can find him on the Twitter birds at Ursa Bearwalker, and our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin McCall, licensed to Creative Commons. Until next week, I'm Dana.
And I'm Chris.